Hello and welcome back to Dudley Central. In this video I want to show you how I created platform 1 on my layout. Now this platform has a retaining wall that sits right behind it. It's quite narrow and it has a curve that it's got to negotiate. I used card and plastikard to get the overall finish, and I wanted to use the Metcalfe slabs for the overall surface finish. I'm quite happy with how it's come out, and I thought I'd just share with you guys how I did it. So with any kind of platform project, the first thing to do is to create a template for yourself. Now for mine, I did have an obstruction of a bridge support, but thankfully this was on a square bit of board for me. So because I knew it was 34mm squared, I could cut this straight into my scrap of paper right in the corner. Then what I do is I line it up with the backboard where the retaining wall is, and then try and trace where the track roughly goes. Now I want this to be as tight to the sleepers as possible. This is so that once I've cut it to shape, I can then test the clearances on the paper and get something that closely resembles the platform being close to the trains, but also it being functional as well, where carriages don't clash with the platform edge. Next part is basically to cut what you've just drawn on the paper. Make sure your blade's nice and sharp, because a blunt knife can often crumple the paper at this point and it will ruin your line. Just try and make a nice swift cut, and try and do it in one stroke if you can. It's not crucial how accurate this one is, as it's only just giving an indication of where the platform could potentially sit. Following on from here, we just need to test that what you've cut fits in the space provided. If you're happy with it, what I'd like to do is put drawing pins on the template, just so I'm sure that it's not going to move when I come to test the clearances required on the platform. So the next stage is testing the clearances that your rolling stock needs to have without clashing into the platform as it runs by. Now this is a really important stage. The longer that you spend doing it means the less problems you'll have down the line. It's really important to try and think in your stock what has the worst turning radius. So on mine, I've basically selected the Mark III carriage, the Class 153 DMU, and I've also picked the Class 68 just because the buffers on them I find seem to protrude as it takes a corner. What you want to do is you want to put your pen or pencil at the corner of the unit, and you just want to run the unit along the track so that the pen touches the paper that you've put down. Now what you will find is with different items of stock, you'll end up drawing a different line each time. It doesn't matter if it doesn't follow the same line. The crucial thing is you will find the worst case scenario line, and this will be the one you eventually cut. The final little bit that I did before removing the template was I drew a line on the cork where the template actually finished. This was so that I could know where the next template would have to sit. So now that I was happy, I needed to cut my template. I needed to cut the worst case scenario, which was the line that was furthest away from where the track sits. Make sure your knife is nice and sharp, as this will make sure you have a crisp edge after you've cut it, and it's easy to cut the paper with. After cutting it out, I just tested it back on the layout just to have another check and make sure everything looked okay. Once I was happy, it was a case of coming along and making sure the next template fit right up against the one I'd just drawn. I lined this up with the line that I'd drawn on the cork, and then followed the same process with drawing a line against the sleepers and making sure that the template was backed up against the retaining wall. I then did the exact same process with the Mark III, making sure that the clearance was suitable. I was more confident about this part because it was a straight bit of section, so I wasn't too worried about the front end clashing with the platform. Once I was happy with the templates, I then moved on to using my card. I used 1mm thick card for this. You can get these in big bundles off eBay. There's various places on there where you can get a big pack of card like this. What I did was I cut the straight sections straight from the card because I knew what the size for the platforms would be from my template. However, when it came to the curve section, I glued this on to the card using a bit of glue Pritt stick, making sure that was stuck down, and then cutting round that on the card to make sure I got the correct shape. So the next thing I did was I cut out some 3mm strips of the 1mm thick card. This would provide a suitable edge for the slabs to sit on over the brick wall on the platform. With the platforms all turned upside down, I then glued these 3mm strips all the way along the edges so to connect the platform surfaces together, and also, as I mentioned before, provide the edging for where the slabs would be sitting above and position where the brick wall would sit beneath. The curved part of the platform required a little more patience, particularly when bending the 3mm strip. Because it was so thin though, there is a bit of play with it. You just have to be very careful when you're gluing it down. For the walls I used a combination of card and plastikard. The card was for the strength and then the plastikard was for the decorative aspect. Luckily I had a few bits left over from a Metcalfe kit, but as I'll show you in my next video, I'll be making these myself from my card to pretty much be exactly the same as these. I think they were 14mm high off the top of my head. But I used these and then I cut the plastikard to be the exact same size so that they could be glued on top later on. When cutting the embossed plastikard like this one, it's worth just being very careful with your knife because it's quite easy to drag it off somewhere where you don't want it to go. So do some gentle cuts and then fold it on the score line and snap it off, and that way you definitely get a clean edge with the plastikard. For the wall construction, I start with the plastikard along the edge where the 3mm spacer was. What I do is I drizzle the rocket card glue along here and then put the plastikard flush up against the spacer so that it follows the right profile. I hold it in place and wait for the rocket card glue to go off. The rocket card glue is excellent because it will go off very quickly. Once I'm satisfied the plastikard is set with the card platform and the spacer, I'll then come in behind with the card sections, which are cut to the same heights. The lengths are actually different and there's a reason for this. This means that the joints for the card and the plastikard are in different places, and effectively when you glue them together it really strengthens the wall. It means that the joint in the plastikard is helped by the card behind, and likewise for the card joints the plastikard bridges it over, and you do result in a very strong structure building it in this way. So with the back wall I wasn't too worried about the visual aspect of it, so I just used the card sections for here. Using the network rail platform coping slabs from Scale Model Scenery, I then looked about adding these slabs to the platform itself. I'd never used these products before, but I must admit I was very impressed with the slabs. The detail on them was fantastic. So what I did here, again, I just came in with my rocket card glue and drizzled it along the platform. I put the slabs alongside just so I could estimate how far to go with the glue, and then put the slabs straight down. With it being laser cut wood, it set pretty quick with the card, as it always does with rocket card glue. So when I got to the curve, this became a little bit challenging with the slabs. It wouldn't have mattered what I used, whether it was timber, card or plastic. It was just quite a time consuming process because I had to cut the slabs to try and get the radius of the curve looking right without it looking jagged. So it was a bit time consuming. I cut the sections of slabs into about 2 or 3 just to try and save me a little bit of time, but even still it was worth putting in the effort to make sure it looked right. Again, once I'd cut them, it was just a case of using the rocket card glue and making sure that the slabs sat squarely with the previously fit slabs. Once completed, I then took the entire thing to get sprayed with Halford's Grey primer. Again, as I always say in my videos, just make sure you do this in a well ventilated area. I always take it outside, to be honest. So I first turned my attention to the slabs which sat on the platform edges. I used my Tamiya paint, and it was XF57, which was called Buff. And what I did was I dry brushed this along the slabs. Again, it's really important when dry brushing to just make sure on your scrap of paper that you get the brush as dry as possible, and then just dab it along the surface that you want it to go on. What you don't want to do is have a really uniform set of slabs, so it really doesn't matter if it looks a bit patchy in places. This will in fact look a bit more realistic, and that the slabs have aged over the years, and this was certainly the look that I was going for on my station. Moving on to the brick sides, Then used the Tamiya buff paint again, but this time for the mortar layer. What I did was I took a little tub of water and put a very small drop of the Tamiya paint in. I then used this as a wash over the brick so that the paint would work its way in to the mortar lines within the bricks, and stain the bricks a little bit as well to try and show some mortar staining. I'd highly recommend you check out my retaining wall video if you'd like to have a look at this method in more detail. Once I was happy that the mortar layer had dried, I then came in and dry brushed the field blue XF50 paint over the top. As you might remember, this matches the retaining wall that I'd done in the previous video. Again, it's just really important to make sure the brush is nice and dry, and just be very delicate as you're running this over the brickwork. Don't worry if it's not perfect. Again, it'll just show up as weathering, and it will look a bit more realistic if it's patchy in places. And also don't worry if the the mortar colour comes through, because again that can look like mortar staining, and this can be quite normal on brickwork that's been standing there for quite some time. After both the slabs and the walls were dry, I did come back through and did a second coat, very lightly, just in areas that looked as if they hadn't received much paint, and I just wanted to make sure that the coverage was there without going over the top of the paint. For the white lining, what I used Tamiya flat white, which is number XF2, and all I did was I dipped a HB pencil into the paint pot and then just drawn this along the line on the outermost edge of the slabs that I'd laid. Again, like the painting of the slabs and the brickwork, I wasn't too worried if it wasn't perfect or really bold. The reason for this, again, it just shows a bit of aging and weathering, and overall I was quite happy with how it came out in the end. The final piece of the puzzle was the slabs for the main platform area themselves. What I used was the Metcalfe self-adhesive slabs. These are really good. I've used these a couple of times now, and to be honest, I'm quite addicted to using them. And I did use them on my station build, if you'd have catched that video. When I use these, I make sure to use drops of glue with them. They do come advertised as self-adhesive, but I find that actually using the rocket card glue, they set really fast, and overall once they're down, they look really realistic and very good. As with the edge slabs, the curve was certainly quite challenging yet again. What I did was I did the slabs along the back edge and then aligned it all according to that, but every time I had to put a slab against the train side slabs, I had to cut them to fit, and as I say, this was quite time consuming, but certainly worth the effort in the end. And that's about it for now. I'll be adding lighting in a future video, but for today I'm quite happy with how it's looking with the slabs and the brickwork, and I think it ties in really well with the retaining wall. I hope you found some of the tips and tricks I've used useful. Please feel free to leave a comment and subscribe, and till the next time, take care.